Hello, and welcome to another episode, the August edition of the Greenfield Files. Hang on, I'm just going to get my chat up just to make sure.
I think
Actually,
it's the July edition. We're just doing it
yeah,
in
we're
August.
just we're just late, but yeah. So, how have you been anyway, Alan? You've been okay?
I've been terrific. I have before me homemade, and I mean totally homemade ginger tea, and I slice ginger with a paring knife without cutting myself, which is uh, these are Ginsu knives. So
Mm.
I am now going to prove my supernatural abilities by eating a piece of raw ginger.
Oh.
The secret chiefs. They're here.
Hang on, I'm just going to let my Discord know that we're live. Where are we? Because the there we go. I just need to get the link because they tell me off for not. There we go.
Who needs
Right.
jalapenos?
There we are. I have told them, so now they can't complain that I haven't sent them the link. Right. um, so, who are your friends behind you?
Oh, that's we did for years. We did a group portrait on Arabia Mountain after the working for 15 years, and it was a little different each time, but that was a sort of typical group during the middle period there. Probably judging from the sky, uh, a spring, maybe 2017, 2018.
Mm.
And over in the corner here is me. Oh,
So,
that must have been when the Tibetan Lama was visiting us because I have one of those Indian things around my neck. You know.
so we're going to talk today about the secret. I've forgotten the name of your book. How dare I? I know it's the Men in Black. Secret Rituals of the Men in Black. Is that it?
Yeah,
Ah, there we go. God, you've got so many books, Alan. It's
yeah. Somebody asked me to name them all, and I thought, well, this is a kind of fame, I suppose. I can't remember. I mean, there are a bunch. And how many are in print? I don't know. One of them, my history of magic, has been updated and the name has been changed. Not my doing, but it just came back out. And I don't even know the new name, but it's that History of Magic 1700 to 2000 was the original name. And I updated it for the last 25 years because I think 21st century magic is really different and really significantly different.
Yeah. So I mean, I apologize to some of the listeners that um, whilst I'm between residences, it's difficult to do the podcast at our usual later time. So I know that we have a lot of American listeners, and some of them, stay up or get up extremely early to watch this. So apologies to those guys. We will be hopefully, if not next month's episode, the month after. I will definitely be in a new place, and we can definitely do this back at its usual time slot. But at the moment, I'm somewhat restricted as to when I can do this because I don't want to. There's someone I don't want to wake up downstairs, so it's
It's
um,
4 a.m. In the eastern United States right now, and I'm Alan Greenfield. And 4 a.m. is normal for me, but hardly anybody in the whole of America is awake. As I was in New York once at Jim Mosley's apartment, we were talking late, and he was very drunk, and he said, "Well, you can go back to your hotel now." And I said, "I don't want to leave, Jim. I don't want to get mugged or get into a fight with a bunch of rowdies out there." And he said, even the boys in the neighborhood have to go to sleep sometime. And that never occurred to me. So
Yeah,
but I
but
didn't leave. I stayed there, you know. Watching Charlie Mingus, the jazz musician who lived across the way from Jim, doing experiments with psychedelic lights and probably psychedelic drugs as well.
so let's have a look at your book, the Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, because on its face it sounds a bit like it might be a UFO kind of book, when it kind of is, isn't it? But it's more. This one felt a bit more occulty than the first one, if that
Yeah,
makes
it's
sense. Yeah.
it's a crossover between ufology and occultism, and it's the only book that I ever really directly addressed the resistance to that connection um, uh, by the occult community, the ufology community. I mean, at the time the book was first published, it was mostly uh, engineering types that were interested in ufology. That's there's a group that I don't know at all that seem to get all the time on TV talking about UFO stuff. Avi Loeb, the scientist from Harvard University, who talks about the extraterrestrial thing coming into our solar system. But that type of person is in a whole different ufology. But the resistance of occultists was something that I felt very keenly. So I addressed that in this book, along with showing how ritual magic and the lore of magic overlaps very strongly, not just in modern times, but throughout history, with the lore associated with the UFO phenomena, which is wherever there are UFOs and they're seen fairly close, the men in black will be soon to follow. And there's all sorts of evidence of that. I mean, in medieval uh, witchcraft, real or imagined, uh, the devil appeared to the coven as the man in black. Now, don't get on my case. I'm just quoting the lore. So if anybody here is a Wiccan believer, witchcraft, in my view, in medieval times, consisted of people who knew herbal lore and were therefore thought to be witches. Just as when the wells turned out to be poisoned, they blamed the Jews. I mean, you know, it was a time of innocence and ignorance, or one of the times of innocence and ignorance. But I'm not, you know, I don't think they were covens, but that is the lore. And anyone who's read the Medias Maleficarum, which I consider the book of naughty Thelemites, the Malleus Thelema.
Is it the Malleus
Thelemum.
Maleficarum, isn't it? Maleficarum, that one?
Yeah, that is, as my first wife, who knew Latin real well, put it. Yeah, the eyes are all long eyes in Latin. So it isn't Caesar, it's Kaiser. So the Germans had it right.
Yeah.
Of course, and of course the Russians had just totally nothing right. Czar.
One thing in the book that I was particularly interested in, because I quickly went over, I keep looking over here at my notes on my phone. Can you talk about HI 331?
Oh, wow. I haven't had that brought up in years and years. Of course, that involves the guy who my most current uh, book, the book on the Black Lodge, is dedicated to the memory of Ron Bonds, who was the publisher of my very first publisher in terms of
Luminet.
books. Yeah, Luminet Press, which was an outgrowth of the BBS for anybody of a certain age and a techie interest in the internet. before the internet, there were BBSs, and
Mm.
Illuminet was originally a BBS. I was on it. Ron ran it. I ran it anyway. When I was working on the manuscript of um, Secret Cipher, Secret Cipher, the Euphonauts, and Secret Rituals, the Men in Black, which I wrote at the same time. They were published 10 years apart because of uh, interference, I guess we'll call it, from the occult community. Actually was very helpful to me because that allowed me to articulate why you really can't be a Crowleyite and not be interested in phenomena associated with UFOs and cryptozoology, as well as the conventional occult stuff and Masonic things. That's just that's narrowing the circle where there is no merit in narrowing it. But anyway, so Ron Bonds, while I was writing the book, had a dream about Aleister Crowley. And you probably are fresher on the details of that than I am, but he dreamed that Crowley, and I don't think I've ever had a dream about Aleister Crowley, but so it was significant to him, and I included his dream in the book. And it turned out to be eerily prophetic, although even when I published the book, I had no clue that he was going to eventually get, as I strongly suspect, offed by the Black Lodge in a very spectacular way. But he
Yeah,
dreamed that
we should do a whole episode on the Illuminet thing because it's more than just Bonds, wasn't it? I mean, there's Jim Keith and there's
Kerry Thornley, and
Mhm.
there may be others, but it was a fairly large stable right there at the end. So I don't know, and I'm not going to name anybody that I don't know was a victim of it. I just know that people around me were dying like flies, and one of my uh, droogies called me and said, Alan, you need to be very, very careful because they're dying like flies out there at Illuminate Press. And then, of course, Ron Bonds himself died, and Illuminate ceased to exist, which was probably the motive. It wasn't personal to Bonds. It was to get
Mhm.
rid of a press that was exposing so many people that were into what then passed for conspiracy theories. This is way pre QAnon.
Mhm.
And it was
It,
sort of
it's
the
the
conspiracies
good
for all
days.
who killed JFK, not,
Yeah, Area
not,
51, that sort of thing, wasn't it? It
yeah,
was yeah.
exactly, not the kind of, uber right wing
Pre
stuff.
9/11. Basically, we've done episodes of the Mozone, and I think Joe Matheny and I did an episode of Sitting Now about this, where we basically tracked that change, where it flipped from a kind of left wing subculture, sort of anti-government, sort of slightly left wing libertarian, I'd say, kind of subculture. It flipped over to a right wing libertarian subculture, where you could say that libertarianism itself also flipped around that time. And
Yeah.
Yeah, we tracked it back to around 9/11. That's where it really started to, you know, take to get a grip. Because like before 9/11, I think there was people like the Waco, the people that there was like Alex Jones was doing stuff about Waco, and that was sort of bringing this Christian right in, and yeah, it was but that people don't understand that a lot of the time. I think people think conspiracy's always been the way it is right now, but it actually, even I'm old enough to remember when conspiracy theory was much more kind of fun, actually, more than anything. There was a kind of fun element to it, and more of a yeah, it was more of a kind of it felt more left wing back then, at least, and it
Well,
felt
yeah, I mean, it was Jim Keith wrote the Gemstone Files, which is about the Kennedy assassination, and it was mostly people not far left, but left of center, who basically just couldn't accept the fact that what was the Donovan song, Abraham Martin and John, Is it Good They Die Young? I premiered on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, not a comedy song.
Yeah. But going back to this HI 331, could you break it down a bit more? Or
do you have it in front of you? Because I think if you read the dream itself, as he conveyed it to me, I can explain further why I think it was a foreshadowing of bad days to come for Illuminat. Although at the time I just thought, well, he's dreaming about Crowley. I need to include that in the book.
I think from what I remember is Crowley was writing something on a board, wasn't he?
Yeah,
yeah,
like he was teaching.
Yeah.
H something something. It works out in the secret cipher as something really, really significant, but I'd have to reread it to.
It's like a universal key or something.
Yeah, and it was a tutorial as if Crowley were speaking to Ron Bonds, and the message I get out of it is, hey, Ron, watch it. You're in very, very dangerous territory now. Whereas what he got out of it was, gosh, Aleister Crowley is talking to me in these ungodly or godly, as the case may be, um, uh, uh, lucid dreams. So,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
if you have the book, look it up. It's a whole chapter. Short one.
And if you don't have the book, buy the book because it's a good book. In fact, I think you can buy it in like a compendium with the first one, can't you? It's like a part 1 and 2 in one book, I believe.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be now parts 1, 2, and 3, all under the cover, the complete secret cipher of the Euphonauts. But whereas Ron was the last of the old time publishers, so the tradition of you get an advance when you submit the manuscript if it's accepted, and they send you 20 quote review copies unquote, so you can tell your friends what a big author you are, and they can kiss your ring, and things like that. That ain't done no more. So I don't know. I know that it's supposed to be now the really complete secret cipher of the Euphonauts, and it includes all 3 books, but I don't know whether that's been done yet or not. But I know that um, the Men in Black book is included under the same cover. You can buy it as a separate book. It's in print as a separate book. I said to my publisher, well, why would people want to buy that when they could buy 2 for 1? And I don't know. It was something about book collectors like to have, if there are 5 editions, they want all 5, and preferably autographed.
I think I've got it twice. I think I've got because I lost it. I lost my copy and then bought the new one with both, the complete one, and then found my. So I've got 2 copies of it. But yeah. Okay, so let's
the story as such is not about the Men in Black. A lot of what is in the book is, but it's really about the notion of when there are UFO type interests and phenomena, the occult intrudes in one way or another, invariably, unless it's just a light in the sky sort of thing, and even there sometimes. And eventually I was able to trace back to, well, most people know about the Albert Bender case and erroneously say that was the first Men in Black case, inferring that my late friend Gray Barker was sort of responsible for that. He was certainly responsible for publicizing it, but it was a genuine experience that scared the bejesus out Albert K. Bender, and in fact scared him out of the UFO business.
Mm.
And I just took it to be, well, weird stuff happens. It wasn't the first Men in Black case, unlike the lore is that it was. In fact, in the modern UFO lore, approximately a week before uh, Kenneth Arnold on June 24th, 1947, saw 9 glowing objects over the Cascade Mountains. And his description was turned by the press into the term flying saucer, which to this day I still prefer. I think it's closer to what the phenomena is than UFO, and certainly UAP, which
Mm.
is apparently not getting as popular as certain agencies of state would like it to be, because
Yeah,
it's
I don't
awkward.
like it. I like UFO. What's wrong with UFO or
Yeah,
UFO? Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Well, I prefer it, but flying saucer seems to capture the, how shall I put it, the vox populi uh, edge of the phenomenon. That is, it's a phenomenon that ordinary people are co-participants in,
mm,
and to assign it arbitrarily to uh, just as big pharma loves to have new names for old medications that they have modified a molecule or something so they can call it something else and patent it. The scientific establishment loves to come up with technical sounding terms to get it as far away. In other words, the whole notion of the scientists in the white coats that are observing from behind a glass shield. And that's not what this phenomena is. It's down and dirty, and the ordinary folks. The scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail where they're coconutting their way through, and a group of ordinary folks are down in the dirt doing who knows what they're doing. They're taking dirt and moving it from one place to another. And it has, I saw this in college, it has the immortal line, King of the Britons, I thought we were an anarcho-syndicalist commune, which was, saying a great deal. But the point is, I have always preferred flying saucer, but I'll cop to UFO or UFO, um, and I won't use UAP except as an explanation of why I don't use it. Anyway, so the Bender case, the basic facts of it have seemed to be well known, which is that Bender was running one of the very first flying saucer private groups, and he made an announcement in his newsletter, the International Flying Saucer Bureau, whatever they called it back then, to the effect that he was going to reveal the truth about flying saucers. And this was before the term UFO was even being used by the government. This was in the early days of Project Blue Book, or even the late days of Project Sign, or Project Grudge, which preceded Blue Book. But anyway, he got visited by 3 men in black clothing, and there was an exchange of information, which Bender decided that he would close the International Flying Saucer Bureau and move to a safe place, which in his case was Los Angeles, from Bridgeport, Connecticut, which that's anyway. Apparently, someone, I suspect it was Gray Barker, had taken pictures of what Bender called his Chamber of Horrors. And over the years, the way it had been described seemed like he was a fan of Halloween uh, stuff. and had, skeletons and things on the walls of his bedroom. He was living with his parents, I think, at that time. He was not a child. I mean, he was a World War II vet, so this is early 1950s. So I imagine he was late 20s at that point. Anyway, I had never seen those pictures, and I was working on an introduction to one of Gray Barker's most obscure books about the Men in Black. And the pictures were in there, and I said something like, "Holy Toledo, we're live," so that's not exactly what I said, but use your imagination. So I thought, wait a minute, this is a magical temple with an altar and all of the accoutrements, albeit in an early 1950s version of it, a pre-Sybil Leek Comes to America with Hans Holzer period where basically magic was in hiatus during that period. There were a few people like myself that were interested, but it was really basically you could find, for example, at the Weiser bookstore in New York, you could find original copies of the volume 1 of the Equinox. I mean the original, not the one they later reprinted, but the original for like $100. And that, I don't know how many sold. I know that Crowley went broke selling that, but it must have been a very small print run, and all of them did not sell, and some of them wound up at Weiser. Of course, they got bought up after the second occult revival, the late 1960s, due mostly to Israel Regardie's regurgitating the story of the Golden Dawn era and Crowley and so forth, which up until then, there were like 10 people in the world that even knew anything about it. I mean, he'd been forgotten. Regardie wrote The Eye in the Triangle, the best biography to this day, in my opinion, of Crowley, which he waited 30 some odd years to write because they did not part company in Hail and Farewell, Dear Friend.
No.
So Regardie had the good taste to wait until it was in perspective and then write a biography of a man who he much admired as a magician, but thought he was not a very nice person, which, I'm not sure about the magician part, but I am reasonably certain that he was not a nice person. As a friend of mine once put it, Frey Rakat is a person that you might like to go to luncheon with, but Crowley is not. You would not want to dine with the master.
It's funny, isn't it, with Crowley that whenever anyone got close to to a sort of higher level, he'd sort of, sort of see them off, wouldn't he? He didn't like anyone daring to come close to the throne, as it were. Especially, I mean, it's everyone, isn't it? Alcad, Parsons. Who was the female partner of his that I've forgotten her name now.
Late in life, it was Lady Harris, and she was
not Lady Harris. There was someone else. There was another partner of his that got quite high. Started to elevate.
Oh, Jane Wolfe.
Yeah, that's it, Jane Wolfe. Yeah, and he sort of discommunicated all these people, didn't he? And yeah, it's weird. He's a strange character, Crowley. I I'm always sort of slightly defending him though as well. I think he gets maligned a lot for his views. Some of his more, I don't know what you call it really, like Victorian political views. Let's put it that way. And
That's a very charitable but accurate way of putting it. But one must understand in fullness what was acceptable parlance for nice people in Victorian times. It would be no go today, even if one is not an addict of wokeness, which I certainly am not. So.
But it's not just that. I mean, he gets accused of racism, which is true. He was racist. But the other thing people always often don't know is he was also present at some of the early Black rights marches in London. So I think he struck me as someone that did bad things and then reflected on them and then tried to do something to address them, and which is quite kind of almost slightly progressive actually in some ways, but not forgiving his earlier things, but his he did at least try to kind of rectify some things, which is more than a lot of people of his time. So
he was really very, at the end, very poor, living in a somewhat dilapidated, essentially a hotel or rest home almost, in very ill health for the last couple of years of his life, and desperate to find something, someone, anyone to be a successor to what he took to be his eon, his era, his role as magus of the eon, which he had the unkindness he had towards Krishnamurti, who lived a long time afterwards and continued to be famous for having disowned his own earlier stuff with the Theosophical Society. According to Rigardy, Crowley was most unkind to.
he wasn't. They didn't get on well, did they? Which one? Who was the lead in the theosophy at the time? Was it Bailey or was it Besant when Crowley was?
Well, depends on which part. Crowley lived to 1947, so you're talking about Bailey before that, Besant, and I think
one of them commented on Crowley, didn't they? I can't remember which one it was. I think it might be Bailey.
Well, Bailey was a rival. I think Besant was. Crowley probably considered her a rival, especially with the order that they built around the young, very young and naive Krishnamurti before he came into his own and decided, I don't want anything to do with these people. They obviously are totally insane. Well, they have the succession of Bishop Matthew. Yeah, well, I don't want anything to do with them. I am going to forget everything. And being a very disciplined yogi, he did. Forgot it, moved to California, as they all do eventually, and lived a very long life when essentially almost all of his competition had died or just gone into utter obscurity, including the Theosophical Society. I mean, it still exists, but it's nothing like it was in Blavatsky's day. Curiously, Crowley had nothing but good things to say about Blavatsky. It's her successors that he found reprehensible. He considered her a high initiate of the AA. She would have been surprised to learn that, but nevertheless, she was safely dead by then. So she could be a high initiate of the AA and the sort of like Saint Germain,
Did Crowley ever comment on Leadbetter?
I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be at all surprised because, again, most of my files have been donated to my publisher for future reference. But I had a bunch of letters that Crowley wrote about the whole institution of the wandering bishops, and he said he was talking to Bishop Crow, who was a wandering bishop in the Matthews succession and others, which, by the way, I also have for whatever they may be worth to the TV audience. But he basically said, unless you can back that up, having a title doesn't mean anything. And I think it was one of the things that I agree with him on. Crow wrote the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica anthem, or what? Not the anthem, but the promotional description of what the EGC was supposed to be, as opposed to what it is and was. And it went back and forth between him and Crowley, and I had that entire exchange of correspondence. And much earlier, Crowley had written to Akkad when they were still speaking, somewhere circa 1920. And he basically, I gather Akkad was doing a version of the Gnostic Mass, the Liber 15 Gnostic Mass, in Vancouver, where he lived most of his life. And he wrote to Akkad to the effect that you really don't know what you're doing where that's concerned. Of course, he would have said that once they had split, they were definitely on different pages. But I thought in that particular case, it just simply showed that Crowley was a Crowleyite, was the number one Crowleyite, and anybody that departed from the truth, the light, and the way of the master was on the wrong path.
I mean, even Grant got kind of they kind of fell out, didn't they, towards the end? But
well, but not in the same way. He at the very end, I think he may have known that he didn't have long. I'm not sure whether that's the case, but he was, asthma had been haunting him for decades, and his addiction to heroin, which was prescribed originally for asthma, because asthma can be very painful, and a lot of magicians, for some weird occult reason, are subject to asthma. Why is one of the great mysteries. But he had very few people left around him. One lodge in California, which really consisted of mostly hangers-on and maybe 4 people. The head of the lodge, he decided, was an ego freak. Smith, I think his name was. It's a very obscure name, so Smith. Where did I get that name? So he wrote him a letter saying, I have it from the chiefs of the inner order that you have become a god. So you need to step down as the lodge master of Agape Lodge and go and live in isolation for the rest of your existence.
I forgot what was the name of that guy?
Something Smith.
Yeah, was it?
Wilfred Smith.
Wilfred Smith. That's it. Yeah. He was sort of standing in the way of Parsons more than anything, wasn't he? I think.
Well, yeah, but then Crowley turned against Parsons too. I think on fairly good grounds, but I mean, I've read all of those letters too, and basically he thought Parsons, like Crowley had room to talk, had his mind in his crotch, which is probably true of Parsons, but certainly true of Crowley as well.
I think it's true of quite a lot of Thelemites, isn't it?
That's what I hear.
Yeah. I've got one question for you, which I don't think we've ever really spoken about this, or if we have, I've forgotten, so we can speak about it again. But what is your take on Lamb, in particular? Because it seems like there's 2 schools of thoughts with Lamb. There's the kind of straight down the line, Crowley, it's a llama. It's people always forget is it Hebrew at the bottom? There's usually in the original picture of lamb, there's some Hebrew at the bottom. I can't remember what it says. It says something to do with llama, doesn't it? Whereas, and it was originally published in an essay about Blavatsky, wasn't it? Which is why it suddenly came to mind, because we were talking about Blavatsky earlier. But the good morning, Scottish Wizard, by the way. Grant claimed, obviously, that Crowley told him that it was something very different. So, what's your take on lamb?
Standard alien trans-channeling with a picture that Crowley was not a great artist, but was a good sketch artist. And it accurately reflects, if you squint a bit, the later descriptions and illustrations of the gray aliens. And that's exactly what I think it is. The argument in the book, Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, is exactly that the overlap of the phenomena that are observed in connection with magic and the phenomena that are observed in connection with the UFO phenomenon are identical, just seen under differing circumstances. And all of Crowley's stuff, as I say in a very long note that I strongly recommend that people read if they don't read anything else in Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, is an explanation of why the entire Aleister Crowley mythos, using that term in the Joseph Campbell sense, not as fiction or anything of that sort, is contingent on the notion that there are, let's say, non-human, non-terrestrial beings that in trance channeling and in manifestations that are a lot more physical than just trance channeling, more like mediumship, physical mediumship, there's no real difference between the Seth material and the Book of the Law. No real difference between the Book of Mormon and Ahaspi. All of these things have the common root of being channeled material. And lamb, in my very firm opinion, which I've had a very long time to contemplate, is sort of a melding of the idea of Tibetan lamas, but also the idea of the type of being that Aiwass was described as. In other words, a secret chief manifesting in semi-physical form, presumably through a medium. The term medium is not used there. It was one of his girlfriends, but nevertheless, and during his New York period, if I remember right, that is no different than the sort of thing that you get by Indians. Does your listener mean Indian Indians or Amerindian peoples?
I think this is a callback to you starting your ritual by eating, your episode today by eating some raw ginger earlier.
You want me to eat more ginger? I have here another piece of ginger. No, I want my tea to be strong.
Yeah. And hi to Joe, by the way, who's somehow, she was saying earlier on, where is it? There we go. Why do I always miss the first 40 minutes? It's probably my fault. It's probably just bad communication on my end. It's because it's early in the morning here, and I'm not fully. I'm fine now, but prior to when I'm scrambling around trying to set up the live stream, I'm terrible at posting links to things. So, but it's nice to see people. And we just got another comment. Where's that gone?
There are people here. Look,
Yeah.
they're here in the studio. Yes. Hi, people. Most of these people won't talk to me anymore, but that's okay. However, I probably consecrated and or empowered virtually everybody that's sitting there.
So I think Ashtar also makes an appearance in your book.
He certainly does.
Yeah, so let's talk
Just
about.
as Ashtar is a very common source of trans-channeling, supposedly, in modern times. There's even a thing called Ashtar Command, which is taking the messages of peace and love and other things that actually come out of the quasi-fascist 1930s interpretation of trans-channeling. That goes back to the William Pelly Silver Shirts and its successor bodies, even unto the present day. So I don't want to say that anybody who pays attention to the Ashtar transmissions is themselves a fascist, but they certainly need to enlighten themselves as to the persistence of Ashtar as a well identified in the grimoires as a demon. Not only as a demon, but a demon who migrated to America and claimed to have not been a fallen angel, as all demons by definition are supposed to be, but that actually was a peace and love being on the other side. And before that, Ashtar was Ashtaroth, a deity in Mesopotamia in various forms, a male form and a female form. The mark of Cain is upon Ashtar's head. And I think that when you get these communications from Ashtar Command, it's not like the Seth material or the raw material. It's suspect from the word go. And in this case, the word go is not the Chinese game. It's the name Ashtar itself. So there's a chapter of the book that is devoted to basically explaining the lore associated with Ashtar, which is one of the most persistent. In the 19th century, you had lots and lots and lots of trans-channel people in communication with an entity that was called Katie King. And in a way, that's mutually validating, although there could be copycats. I mean, it starts out, as far as I know, with Blavatsky in Egypt, and what seems to have caused her and Colonel Olcott to have picked up their merchandise and headed out to India because apparently they had a falling out with Palos Medamon, the head of the HBFL in Egypt, who did not like her trans-channeling of, I think she considered Katie King her control. And then lots of other mediums were also communicating with Katie King. What that represents is another story. But the fact that if you have spontaneous cases of people not in touch with one another, and this is not just before the internet, not just before television, but long before radio. And I doubt that people were, tapping out in Morse code. Katie King is my contact. It was an age of slow communication all around the empire. So the Theosophists, as they became, migrated to India and stirred up a lot of trouble there, but they were more or less persona non grata in Egypt thereafter.
You have a nice comment from Jo, by the way, on the screen at the moment. She says she'll natter with you anytime, Alan.
Well, let's natter away. You want some ginger tea? We can sit and discuss things for hours and hours.
There's a part in the book about the Mitchell sisters as well, if I remember rightly. What's the relevance of the Mitchell sisters to occult UFOs and whatnot?
Well, I took them as a typical case of people that claim communication with alien beings, and showing that the case is connected with other cases from around the world that almost certainly had no conventional connection betwixt them. The example there was the spooky case of George Adamski's afterlife, where 3 days after he died, a gentleman in Wiltshire, I believe it was, sees a spacecraft land, and a being calling itself Yamsky comes out and writes in this, I may be fracturing the story slightly, but writes out the more or less Greek words Adelphus, Adelpho. And the Mitchell sisters, who lived in Maryland, and that's where their case occurred, was in Adelphi, Maryland, and had similar characteristics to the Yamsky case. Although to this day, that's a fairly obscure case. It may be uh, more well known in Britain than it is over on this side of the pond, but it's not known, not well known. So I wanted to do two things. One is showing how these cases connect, and even without any kind of direct, line of publicity or anything, because the Mitchell sisters were pretty obscure too. I read about them in a newsletter that was put out with a guy that later became a Nazi or was already a Nazi. I don't know. And when I say a Nazi, I mean a Nazi, like as in goose stepping, uniforms, and swastikas. But which may explain why I got all of these anti-Semitic newsletters, the cross and the flag. And I wondered, how did I get on that list? They clearly are sending it to the wrong guy, but okay. But it may have been that guy, and I think he's still around as far as I know. But I'm not going to mention his name because presumably he's still around, goose stepping his way through life. So, where do we go from here? The other thing that I wanted to do was to take a typical contact case and use the secret cipher of the Euphonauts, that is the code out of Liber Al that Jim Lees and the crew at the British Journal of Ceremonial Magic decoded after, what was it, 70 years? Yeah, something like 70 years. 1974 from 1904. That's 70 years. It's exactly 70 years. What a coincidence. My math is impeccable. That's the opposite of impeccable. But I wanted to use that to make sense of a case like the Mitchell sisters, which, if it were in isolation, would be that that pattern that some ufologists have said proves or gives evidence that this phenomena is generated by trickster elements in the spirit world, for lack of a better term. And uh, I think that there is some truth in that, but you really need to understand that a trickster, in the classical sense of the idea, is not a clown or a juggler or a prevaricator of some sort, but actually someone who is trying to do the equivalent of a Zen master, asking for the sound of one hand clapping and then slapping the student across the face abruptly. It's not done out of cruelty, it's done to wake them up. And what the tricksters are doing is giving a paradox to the percipient, to the witness, and hoping that they make sense out of it. Well, the best example of that in current lore that I can see is there must be 50 gazillion ghost hunters now of varying levels of understanding. But I would say that only the Newkirks in the Hellier material and a few other uh, people in their 30s and 40s, so younger than the nuts and bolts people of my generation, have understood that there is a trickster element in all of the phenomena. And rather than going, oh, well, this is a fake, if you start out looking for goblins and something else comes your way in the course of that investigation, go with the something else. And if in the course of that investigation, something totally different, and now for something completely different, okay, completely different, go with it. That is following the synchronicities, which is precisely the advice I give to all field investigators, and which, most ghost hunters, they're still looking for ghosts. Just the gray lady that haunts the castle, they just want to see it or catch it on an EVP file or whatever. And that's as far as it goes. Not, yeah, but I heard a dog barking in Morse code at the same time while I was waiting for the gray lady. The dog is the key thing. Even if the gray lady shows up and throws invisible flowers at the recipient, I mean, it's just a question of following the synchronicities. I hope that is clear to people that might want to do field investigations, because if you don't follow the synchronicities, you're not going to get to the bottom of what the gray lady is. But if you follow the synchronicities, you might begin to intuit what the entire range of phenomena are, is, are, is, whatever.
Do you agree with being a bit selective with your synchronicities, though? Because that's something I think that,
Don't go
especially,
crazy. I prescribe, if you really are following synchronicities and something new is happening every day, stop. Sit down in front of your television and watch Looney Tunes or other Warner Brothers cartoons for at least 48 hours and don't even think about it, because otherwise therein lies madness.
yeah, it seems that, especially when you first kind of get into magic, you start seeing synchronicities everywhere, don't you? And I think as you become more of a discerning magician, you sort of start to discern which synchronicities are you know, more valid than others, or more you know, significant than others, at least.
Yeah, I think that you can develop a sense of the significant coinciding as opposed to the not particularly significant coinciding. It's like one that is a favorite of mine is every time, I mean, I've read everything that he's written more than once, but fiction and nonfiction. But every time I would read something by Philip K. Dick, a series of synchronicities would follow. But if I then anticipated further synchronicities, they stopped. What was the message there? Well, the synchronicity there was flow with it. Don't push the river. If you push it, the magic disappears or dissipates. So you have to develop kind of a sense of where to begin, where to take notes, what to take seriously, and always, as I am sometimes criticized for, but too bad, make sure that you maintain your sense of humor. It keeps you sane and keeps you working and following the path, not
Mm.
blowing it at some point or other.
Even Crowley, I mean, Crowley doesn't get enough credit for this, but he has a great sense of humor.
Well, it was often at other people's expense, and I try to avoid that, but still, yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, he could be very funny. He could also be very mean. But
Yeah.
then I had a friend, his name was Sam, and he was sort of a product of Auschwitz, which was not a very humorous place. But he had a really, really, really good sense of humor. But it also, he turned it on people often, and it was contagious. And I found myself laughing myself into a fit, almost literally, at some of the things that he said. I think he was, and he was sort of transitional between some DP camp in Germany and Atlanta when he was a kid, but his family spoke only Yiddish at home, so he learned English from television. And but he had that Yiddish sense of humor, which a whole generation of famous comedians had. And I thought, well, I've always wanted somebody who was younger who had that same grasp. So yeah, and he was very funny, but he was also very barbed. And I think
Mm.
Crowley was, while not a Yiddish comedian at all, nevertheless he had a very, very uh, well, he was the Laird of Boleskine for a while.
Joe says whimsy is an underappreciated magical skill.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I wish there were more of it because there would be less insanity closely associated with the work that we do. It's weird work, and you have to take a break and also recognize the ironic humor in virtually every case that you come upon.
Mm. So
Um,
one thing you talk about in the book is the ritual. I can never. I always get this name wrong. The ritual for calling down owns, is it? Or
Well, I've
Onus?
always heard it as Oannes, but you're on
Oannes.
safe ground
Yeah.
however you pronounce it because nobody speaks ancient Sumerian.
No. Oannes sounds better though.
Even even in Akkad, uh, which was the next empire in Mesopotamia, they didn't really know how to. After a certain point, they didn't know how to speak uh, um, Sumerian, which was a non-Semitic language, and the Babylonians also, like the Akkadians, were a Semitic people. Um, they had no clue. They couldn't even read the cuneiform documents, even though they used that same writing system, because the history of Sumer by that point was lost and only rediscovered, I think, by your classical Western wanderers in the East who basically happened upon Babylon and Assyria, and then on Sumer, real, real late in history, like 1930s maybe. I may be skewing that. That isn't my field as such, but I think it was less than 100 years ago. And when it was found, it was just totally unknown. It's their language, at least, was an Indo-European language. But where they came from, nobody really knows. They said they came out of the sea, like the Oannes, who was an amphibious being that could be on land in the daytime, but had to return to what is now the Persian Gulf at night. Sumer was sort of part of the Persian Empire later, and would now be in whatever is left of Iran, in the part inhabited mostly by Arabs and whoever is left from the Zoroastrian world and Kurds and other non-Persian people. So, and also in the lower part of Iraq, I don't even know if they exist now, but up until the Seventh Army tear-assed into Iraq, whenever that was, 1980s, 2020. It seems a long time ago now, but the Marsh Arabs had been living in Sumer, in the area that was Sumer, for thousands of years. And I think they were Shia, like the Persians, the Iranians. And some idiot in America said they should rise up and destroy Saddam Hussein. This is when he was still in power. And they were slaughtered. They were looking for an excuse, and they had already slaughtered lots and lots of Kurds in the north. So I don't know whether the Marsh Arabs even exist anymore, but they were sort of a fossil civilization from the far past, only because they lived in, as the name implies, in marshlands where nobody else would live. But at one time, that was a very fertile place, and apparently the Sumerians were very skilled at digging irrigation ditches for harvesting various crops in an area not really amenable to crops. So they built a very big civilization, which some say is the first civilization, which is, that kind of view is kind of no longer in vogue, in that the Indus Valley civilization, also abandoned in India, seems to have preceded it. And now, if you kick a rock out of the way in Turkey, you're going to find a civilization that goes back maybe 12,000 years. So who knows who's going to eventually kick over a rock in the, I guess it'll be uninhabited by then, Sudan, which is where a real slaughter is going on right now. But in what they called the Green Sahara back in the day, the Sahara was not a desert. It's alternated between
I'm going to
desert.
wrench you back on track, back to the ritual, the calling down of Oannes.
Oh, you want to talk about the ritual?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The being that is sort of the ancestor of all priesthoods, in that he was, as the word amphibian implies, sort of human and sort of fish-like, and had a fish head. And the priests that arose in Sumer, then Akkad, then Babylon, they wore a mitre. And that has survived to this day in high church ritual, including, if you look at the mitre carefully, it even has, not only has the fish mouth, but fish eyes on it. And I think that is because the whole magic of transubstantiation, which is really what the power of the priesthood is, the power to, as Crowley put it, to transform things one from another. That's from 777. Look it up, people. Um, so, if this is an ongoing phenomenon like Ashtar, then it can be summoned like any demon or being or whatever. So, taking apart the sort of standard ritual that comes out of probably Egyptian Heka, but we get it through the Greco-Egyptian texts that have resurfaced in the last 200 years. And a version of it was adapted into the Golden Dawn in the, I guess, in the 1880s, maybe, which was eventually adapted by Crowley into Liber Samech, which, of course, with the Crowley touch, it had a satanic edge to it. But I thought, well, why don't I apply the cipher to this? And when I did, I discovered there was a way to transform the barbarous names in the archaic ritual, just as with a lot of other rituals. If you have the decoder ring, which is the page, the grid page in Libera, you can summon this being on one day of the year and it manifests. A group that no longer exists for various reasons, although there's a successor group in New Orleans, actually taped doing the summoning as in the book. They did it on the wrong day, which I may not have given proper instruction on that, but it needs to be done at the helical rising of Sirius. It's a Sirius, S-I-R-I, Sothis ritual, and that is connected to the helical rising of Sirius, which marks the beginning of summer in lots of classical cultures. I mean, there are observatories in Southwest United States that some of the First Nations people would use a certain window, which only at the helical rising of Sirius, just before the sun appears, Sirius would come through this slit and they would know, okay, summer is here. And the time is right for dancing in the streets. Okay. Back when it wasn't too hot to do that. So if you do the ritual at dawn on that day, there will be a manifestation of the awareness, which is very similar to the Nomo of the, most famously, the Dogon people of West Africa, but also the Bozo and the Bandera peoples, all related people along the Niger River. They all have this basically the same story that in their remote antiquity, this being from a planet around the dual star Sirius, which at that time no one even knew there was a dwarf star rotating around the brightest star in the sky, which is Sirius. They apparently had their manifestation long ago, and that was sort of the basis of Robert Temple's excellent, still unrivaled book on the subject, The Sirius Mystery. Whether this has anything more to do with the actual star Sirius, or maybe just a position in the heavens that influences the ability to invoke this particular being, which it is, I can't say. I'm not big on the ET thing. I'm more of the ultra-terrestrial school. But you can invoke it and receive a message from it and then license it and command it to depart. Having said that, no one should ever attempt this ritual to actually perform it as opposed to read it. Reading it is fine, understanding that it is a real viable thing to do, but it's certainly for advanced adepti only who also know a great deal about what to do if once you have invoked it, it won't leave. You really need to know vanishings, including those that you will do while you're hyperventilating because the thing won't leave, including how to contain an invoked or evoked being in a triangle while you're in a circle so you don't get eaten, because these things have great power and great appetites, apparently. You have to at least have done serious Enochian working for years. And also, you need to be an empowered, that is, consecrated exorcist, and be able to exercise fearlessly in the event that you really have an emergency situation, as can happen in certain magical ceremonies. So learn it, talk to people that know what they're doing, who have performed it, but don't try it at home, people. That's not what it's there for. It's there to educate, not to get you eaten by an amphibious being from space or other membranes, which is what I think is the case.
I think we should end off with one last section, which I found really interesting, which was the ultra-terrestrial roots of the Masonic fraternity.
Boy, that's the essence of what the book is. Some people who do not have Masonic associations ask, well, what is the connection between Freemasonry and the occult, let alone with UFOs or cryptozoology, or any of these various manifestations that I say all are one? Well, obviously, organized occult bodies like the Golden Dawn or the AA, or most particularly the OTO, BOTA, Hermetic Brotherhood of Light, Church of Light, they all have a graded system of initiation that usually borrows a great deal of its initiation material from Freemasonry. And the reason for that is somewhere in the Wayback Machine, which I trace in one of my books back to the early 1700s, and could go back much, much earlier than that, but you have to stop somewhere with dealing with the past, especially with secret societies, as secret societies are secret. And to pry loose their secrets, you have to at least have been initiated into one or more of them, or something related to them. But they basically are doing all of the things that ceremonial magic does above a certain level in these organizations. It's real obvious in the Golden Dawn material, but the founders of the Golden Dawn were from the SRIA, which was kind of an off Masonic organization. Some of the founders of it were, I think, Woodman and the guy that did the Royal Masonic Cyclopedia, best book on the subject, which is why Masons don't like it. Trying to think of his name. Anyway, if you can find it, I don't know that it's in print, but the Royal Masonic Cyclopedia is the definitive crossover between 19th century magic and 19th century Freemasonry. And there are particular rites of Freemasonry, often called irregular, but that's because regular is defined by the group that founded speculative Freemasonry in a pub in the 1720s by a group of aristocrats who wanted to get in with the craft masons and didn't know any other way to do it. And I guess they had a few pints too many, and that's where speculative Freemasonry originates. But operative Masonry, which is to say the people that built the great cathedrals and arguably the pyramids and other ancient buildings going back to the year zero. Even there, it's argued that the findings at Göbekli Tepe and other places that I was mentioning, that kick over a rock in Turkey and you'll find another even older ruin. They seem to have had great knowledge of the stars and of their implications, and had a fixation on astronomical knowledge. Now, there are reasons for that post-agricultural revolution. The problem is that it is generally agreed that the earliest ruins that they're finding now were pre-agricultural. They were hunter-gatherers who somehow knew how to build complex structures oriented to the stars, and that seem to have been built with a knowledge of engineering that was only thought to have come about thousands of years later. So don't go out and buy David Icke's books, for God's sake. But
They're funny. You're saying about comedy and magic earlier on. That's,
well, go to Graham Hancock. That's reasonably reliable, but not to David Icke, who is not reasonable about much of anything.
lizard people.
Wasn't he a wrestler at one time or something? I've heard many
footballer. He was a footballer.
Oh well, that explains a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, somebody found a skull in the Highlands in Scotland and kicked the skull. That's the way the story goes anyway. And that's what became soccer football. Association football.
Proper football.
I don't know. It's more proper
I
than
don't like
American
either. I'm the least sporty person you've ever met. But so ultra-terrestrial.
Baseball. Baseball is a mystical sport. It has nothing but mystical symbolism all over the place. When I tell people about it, they're instant converts. They don't like the sport, because if you don't like sports, you don't like sports. But they become fascinated with the phenomenon. It's built around a diamond. There are 3 strikes and you're out, 4 balls and you walk. A 7th inning stretch. In other words, what are these numbers about? Well, they're all mystical numbers, and I'm not the creator of that. Some mathematician worked that out. Most baseball hardcore fans.
Joe says that David Icke was a goalkeeper, so even worse.
Well, then he didn't do a header. He just used his hands. But I tell you, those that bounce it off their head are probably in a lot of trouble, because they're saying now, due to a recent unpleasantness here, that American football, which means American and Canadian football, the helmets aren't adequate to keep people from having brain damage, which comes back to haunt a lot of them later in life, and apparently also knocks loose a certain violent streak. So it's not my favorite sport. It's also boring, but people don't think so.
I'm told by British fans that it's poor man's rugby, is what I hear. But
Well, but in rugby you don't wear equipment.
no, exactly. That's what I mean. Hardcore.
Well, yeah, but I mean and you can use your hands, unlike soccer or football. But the difference is you basically are doing what medieval knights would do on horseback in full armor, and still every once in a while you would lose a duke or a baron or a king. Actually, one instance, I believe Henry VIII suffered an injury which he carried through life because they didn't really have a leg injury, and his leg festered for the rest of his life. It was very dangerous, and American football encourages that because you're wearing shoulder pads, knee pads, a protective undergarment for your privates, and a helmet that is supposed to protect your face. And unlike hockey players who have no front teeth, to protect your dental work as well, but it doesn't protect your skull, basically. And ask any soldier who has ever had an explosion go off near them. Yeah, they're glad to have a helmet, but it doesn't, it isn't immunity. It doesn't protect you from the very fact of all of that armor encourages them to say, kill them. And they don't mean that literally, but sometimes they are literally killing each other.
Before we lose all of our listeners to sports talk, what was the so the ultra terrestrial connection to the masonry was what we were looking at.
Okay. The specific instances that you get are that in certain degrees, we were talking about the Oannes, okay? The Oannes figures into the third degree in the OTO. It figures into Crowley's mystical play, the name of which escapes me, the Ship.
What is it called?
The Ship, I think.
Is it the Ship?
Yeah, I think so. It figures into a great deal of magical lore, but is incorporated into, for example, there is a degree in the rites of Memphis and Mitzrayim, which is the rite that I subscribe to, I guess you could say, where there is a night of Sirius, Sirius. All of these things have signs and grips that essentially are the points on the human body which empower. Essentially, they are very similar to the 360 classical acupuncture meridians, points, not the meridians. And it seems that the system that has come down to the rites of Memphis and Mitzrayim, which were combined in the 1820s, consists of respectively 90 and 97 degrees. And at this point, some have added a 98th, 99th, and 100th degree. I think all of those are fragmentary, and that is discussed in whatever the name of my book on the Rite of Memphis is. I think it's called The Complete Rite of Memphis. But there's a section in the very back of the book, an appendix on how this system is basically built around a fragment of a 360 grade or degree, both terms that are used in organized magic, if you will, and which go back to gratus, gratus, the Latin word for step. And of course, that's exactly what you have in the steps of 360 degrees, a circle, the arc, known in astrology and known in various other ways. In degree work, in grade work, as in the Golden Dawn and the AA, there's even a Sanskrit term that goes back far earlier than it's usually the etymology dictionary will tell you that it's based on the Latin term gradus, but it seems to me that there's an Indo-European root word which I couldn't pronounce even if I could remember it, but it's basically an ancestor of the Latin term, which probably only goes back 1,500 years, maybe. I mean, it's not a seed language by any means.
Mm.
So you will find contained within the degrees something I didn't realize until I read it in Michael Berdio, and I believe I quoted in the book. You don't have it in front of you, do you? And
No, not currently.
I don't own a copy. They don't send me these things, honest. But if you see it in the book, there is a quote that basically shows the connectedness that you will find in the Masonic degrees, especially in the Rites of Memphis and Mitzrayim, but you will also find it in...
I do have a copy here. Hang on. 1 second.
I'm hanging.
Vamp, Alan, vamp.
Okay. Charleston. Oh, he didn't mean vamp, like in the 1920s. Why, that is.
There we go. I do have a copy. It's the complete one.
Yes, well, turn to page 126. I don't know what page it's on, but there's a quote by Berdio in which he says, "The rites of Memphis and Mitzrayim, strange as it might seem," and I'm paraphrasing, which I don't like to do with Berdio. If you can find the exact quote, please do. But it's strange as it might seem.
That chapter? The ultra-terrestrial trail in other degrees? No, it's probably the one before this then, isn't it? Yeah, here we go. Okay, keep vamping.
And I will sing because I'm happy. Old Man River, that old man River, he must know something.
Can't see it.
Don't say nothing. Find it. You just keep rolling. Don't go away, people. Keep on rolling along. I mean, Berdio is almost 90 now, and he's the most advanced.
He is 90. He just had his 90th birthday in Chicago.
Well, then he's almost 90, but beyond. He don't plant taters. He don't plant cotton. And them dad plants them. Anyway, what he said was, as strange as it might seem, his sense of humor, the rites of Memphis and Mitzrayim are actually a form of
Here we go. It's right at the beginning. A number of authorities, including Berthiaud, a conservator of one branch of the old rite, have suggested that the Egyptian rite of Freemasonry is actually a secret storehouse of UFO wisdom. Kenneth Mackenzie's 1877 catalogue of the latest form of the rite of Memphis lists the 63rd degree as the adept of Sirius, but by the time of the distinguished Grand Master John Yarker's last revision of the rite, AD Ept of Sirius had been mysteriously omitted in favour of Sublime Kawi, 63rd degree. Yeah, there you go. That's the only thing I can see with Berthiaud.
No, he said in the Voodoo Gnostic workbook which is not exactly voodoo as practiced in Haiti or anywhere else. It's its own system, which could apply anywhere in the world. It's very eclectic. But he said,
here we go.
this is the quote from the master.
All of this strongly suggests that the knowledge of the secret was indeed intentionally hidden in the symbolism and structure of the high degree Freemasonry, including the Egyptian rite of Memphis and Mizrae. As Grandmaster Michael Berthier had suggested, that rather lifeless system, which contained some rather interesting Egyptian roots. Berthier wrote was really quite remarkable. It was the design for the computer and energy system of what we might now be tempted to call something like a UFO object or projection from some empirical or chaotic, but which at that time, as strange as it might seem to be to the uninformed reader of these matters, was posing rather inconspicuously as an Egyptian rite of ancient Freemasonry with the name Memphis Mizrae. There you go.
I read that line, like, took me a year to read the Voodoo Gnostic workbook because it, I was going to say meanders, but that's not doing it justice. It goes into so many different areas and it doesn't easily mark them out. You just have to go on the wild ride.
To go with the flow.
And exactly. And when I got to that quotation, I went, wow, I am in an organization that basically works the rite of Memphis and have had an interest in this since I was just a wee lad, 13, 14. But I never thought of it in terms of it being, the only connection I ever saw was spooky stuff. UFO stuff is spooky, ghost lore is spooky, tarot cards are spooky, and Masonic stuff is spooky. But I never thought of the connection, and it immediately fell into place. The references to the Oannes, the references to starry wisdom, which plays a major role in Kenneth Grant's recension of the Crowleyan system, or the Crowley/Grant system, which I think is a fairer way to put it. It reached down into my own experience and said, even the signs and grips, which seems like a silly thing, except way back when craft masonry was illiterate, very skilled, but illiterate. That is, let's say someone was building the Chartres Cathedral and travels as a journeyman to Padua to put up to Pisa to put up a tower that didn't quite sit as well as it might. The local masters won't know that you are an initiated journeyman unless you know the proper signs and grips. And that's all there is to it. It's in an age where people were illiterate for the most part, especially in the skilled labor, class of people. You had to have something in the way of to mark someone who was traveling from a distant place. It is the way that Masonic secrets were conveyed right up until the 18th century, and as a legacy was carried forward. This is the way I looked at it, as a symbol, and like the way that they use a gavel and an angle and other basically primitive tools from the building trade. Not true. They are all conferred in an initiation by silently empowering the candidate or the new initiate with certain of the hot points, the puissance, that Vertigo devotes a lot of attention to on the human body, analogous to, as I said before, the 360 baseline points in acupuncture, but not so much for healing purposes as for empowerment. And we know of 97 points on the human body, but it clearly is not all of the points that are there. And I suspect that just as there are many sub-points and sub-points because a living system is never confined to just one, fixed location. But people who have the gift of second sight, or what the Castellana system calls third attention, can see these points, active or not, if you're a living being. And if you have the right empowerment, you can empower that point on a person. And in fact, what is being done with the signs and grips and words that are supposedly simply the way you get into the room for an initiation are in fact the empowerment, the equivalent of the laying on of hands in episcopal empowerment. And that was a real major revelation to me, and I found it to be consistently true. Of course, there is the drawback that we only know arguably 100 of those points, which means that the rest are lost in time. Now, there may be a few people in the world who know some of the additional points, which may account for why there's 100 degrees in the Memphis Mithraeum system now, whereas when I got involved, there was 90 in Memphis and 96 or 97, depending on whose version you got, in Mithraeum. There are only a handful of people, including myself, that have had the 100th degree conferred on them, and only 2 in the particular rite that I work with, the World Association of Egyptian Obediences. And that still is a fragment of a much, much larger system of empowerments that seems to have originated, I was going to say originated in Sumer, but let's say came to the attention of modern thinkers on the subject from Sumer, but possibly if we learn, don't forget the civilizations that came before Sumer, it would be uncharitable to call them pre-literate because probably they had some different system of recording things that may have been just as sophisticated as written languages, just maybe not as readily identifiable to people brought up on an alphabetical system. Am I getting too deep in the weeds here?
A little bit.
Okay. Well, folks, if you know the alphabet, you got the secret, so you're good. Okay? Okay.
Anyway, so that's all we have time for today, folks. I'm going to be back this week with an episode of Sitting Now. I think it's going to be about black metal, weirdly, but it has an occult undercurrent to it with an old friend of mine who's the kind of world authority on black metal, but has written at length about the occult connection there. I think we'll try and do a Mauve Zone this week. That won't be live though, so that will just be released. And also, I think this week Ulysses Black and I are going to try and do a couple, maybe 2 live streams. One about I did a live stream the other day on my own about this new conspiracy theory that's rearing its head, and we sort of broke down a video. So I think I might redo that with Ulysses Black. But also we're going to do an episode on the Hellfire Club, because we went and visited the Dashwood estate recently, and so we've both become quite interested in the Hellfire Club. So we're going to do an episode on that. And
Are you going to drink a milk punch while you talk about it?
I don't know. We might try and bring some nymphs along though, so we'll see.
But, well, okay.
But anyway, thanks for spending some time with us again, Alan. And
delighted. I'm sorry I got in the weeds, folks. I'll bring a size the next time.
Yeah. I'm quite good at yanking you out of the weeds anyway.
Yes,
so.
You are very good at it. Rude as hell, people. He's rude as hell, but he keeps it on point. Unlike me.
I'm a what do you call it? A Greenfield whisperer. I'm quite good at getting.
Hi, where are you going with that? Electric sheep. I'm going to electric sheep.
I'm going to install something in his chair for the next episode. So every time he starts to go in the weeds, I just hit a button. He goes. You suddenly see him jump. Yeah, suddenly jump.
A little flashlight, a torch, electric torch. You turn it on once, and I switched subjects. Old Man River. I thought I was real good while you were trying to find that quote.
Yeah, I thought I did pretty good. You did some good vamping. Thank you to the Scottish Wizard. He says we both look well, so that's good. We're doing something right. So there you go. It's
yeah. Tell him to ask the people at Scottish Paranormal why they haven't had me on their show for years.
Scottish Paranormal. Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, we shall see you guys in about a month's time. This was a little bit late, this one, but that was mostly my fault. Mostly my fault. Yeah, I'd say.
Well, not your fault.
No.
Just your circumstances.
Yeah.
Prevented. World War III went by, and
you
all had to go to the shelters. Yeah, it's just
exactly.
awful.
Usual stuff. But we'll see you next time, and I'll see you in a week.
Okay. And prosper.
Farewell.